Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on Joy Asonye Live this beautiful evening. And today we'll be discussing one of the very important issues, one that the president would have to tackle immediately. That is the UNESCO report of over 20 million Nigerian children who are out of schools. It's a menace that a lot of state governors have tried to face and tackle, but it doesn't seem to be going away. Cultural, religious, or what are the hindrances to this problem, and how can we actually solve this problem? In the studio with me is someone who has started doing something about it, that is making the education sector look somewhat attractive to children and young people so that they can join the force, those who want to be better in life. In the studio with me to discuss how Nigeria can address the out-of-school children challenge is Ikulamberu Ayotunde, President, Educand Education Initiative. Thank you so much for being part of the program.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Well, when we return from this very short break, we'll get into the reason why he's doing what he does and what he indeed does, and how Nigeria and the government can contribute to ensure we end this menace of out-of-school children. 20 million is a lot. We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back from that very short break. We still have Ikulamberu Ayotunde. I hope I pronounced that right.
Ikulamberu.
Ikulamberu. Okay. Well, I tried. You won't blame me. Again, he's the president, Educand Education Initiative. I think that's where we start this conversation. What is the Educand Education Initiative?
All right. Educand Education Initiative is a non-governmental organization saddled with community development, education, making education, the force to reckon with in our society. In the last 11 years, we've been able to adopt and to adopt the standards via the spell and trail competition for primary and secondary schools in Nigeria. By 2017, we had UNESCO's endorsement, and that had to do with the media and information literacy curriculum, which had to do with hate speech, stemming the tide of hate speech, fake news. These are things that are, I should just say, are formations of terrorism and all of the ills that has to do with the digital space. So UNESCO, seeing the Spell and Trail platform as an indubitable platform that brings together parents, teachers, and students, committed us to propagating the gospel of media and information literacy, and that we've done by adapting that to the UNESCO media and information literacy clubs in secondary schools across Nigeria, which we are going to definitely be doing more in the coming years. So that's what we do, and that's what we've done in the last 11 years.
What would you say the spell and trail competition is about? If you can give us a good overview as to what it really means and how children really feel participating in this competition.
All right,
please go ahead.
The spell and trail competition is the spelling competition for primary and secondary schools in Nigeria. Began in Ondo State in the year 2012. Across the 3 senatorial districts. As at 2022-2023, Spell and Trail already has established a presence in 15 states across the country, affected over 500,000 students off and on stage, and by and by, it's not just about the spelling per se. Parents can actually tutor their children, teachers can tutor their children. However, the platform is one that encourages students to have a goal to work towards, ability to thrive under pressure, and also ability to form camaraderie. You understand? That's one of the things I talk about in terms of unity schools. That was the objective, or that was the goal of our forefathers when unity schools were established, when the NYC was established. So the Spell and Trail is a platform for camaraderie. I mentioned earlier that we already have 15 states on board. That's to tell you that you have students from Bauchi being able to interact with students from Ekiti.
Wow.
You know, students from Cross River being able to interact with students from, you know, Oyo State, and that's what the Spill and Thrill platform does. You know, I attended a unity school. I don't know if that's the proper definition of a unity school. I attended a military school, Nigerian Navy Secondary School, Abeokuta. What that afforded me is that today I have colleagues, I have friends all over
across the country.
Across the country.
Do we still have those initiatives where 25% from every state or region?
Security has actually bastardized the process. Right. So you have parents. At 10 years, my parents were comfortable to put me on a bus from Abeokuta, in a public transport bus, from Abeokuta to Akure. I doubt if there's any parents who want to do that right now.
I can imagine. I mean, even young people who are graduates, parents are still very skeptical.
Very skeptical. Not to talk of secondary school students, so they will rather have them in their resident cities
where they can keep an
eye on them, rather than taking them to places, you know, where they can interact with everybody, with students from all over.
So how does this interaction with this Spell and Thrill competition, how does it work? Is it technologically motivated?
Absolutely, but not totally. Okay, not absolutely, partly. I would say partly, but not totally. That's because our elimination stages are technologically driven. However, we still have on-stage competitions. So now that we have a huge number of participants, you know, we have the elimination stage, especially from the senatorial district and the states, being technologically driven. We have CBT for those stages, and then the regional stage now, where we have all of the geopolitical zones. We now have,
for context, CBT is a computer-based test,
yes,
right?
Computer-based test at the regional stage and also the state competition. However, from the regional stage and then the national, their on stage competition. So that's why I said that you have students from all over interact. So what that means is that if we have the Southwest comprising of Ekiti, Osun, Ondo and the likes, you would also still have students from Enugu, Bayelsa interact with students from all of those other geopolitical zones. So just like I said, Spell and Thrill platform, apart from the spelling aspect of it, you also have a platform for camaraderie, for intercultural dialogue. Intercultural dialogue for having students be able to thrive under pressure. For anyone who has been at any Spell and Thrill event, of course you'd agree with me that it's not an easy ride.
So what kind of colleges or secondary schools are participating in this? Is it just government or it's private included?
All inclusive, both the private and the public owned schools, from the primary to the secondary category. So you have we interact with SUBEB, State Universal Basic Education Boards, for the public primary schools, and we get the private primary schools to register, and then for the secondary schools we interact with the state's ministries of education for them to register the public schools, and also private schools. We engender their
I had already told my viewers that we'll get to why you do what you do. It's very exciting. I mean, but it must be tasking. So what propels you to ensure that this is indeed done?
I consider myself to be more introverted than extroverted. However, when I was in primary school, even in secondary school, my teachers really saw in me that I could do the things they felt I could do. So while in primary school, I used to represent my school in debates, as the newscaster of the school. Also in secondary school, I used to represent my school in an impromptu. I don't think we do that anymore. There's this competition they call impromptu speeches, where you walk up to the console and then you pick a topic and then you start to speak about it immediately. You understand? So all of those things, I saw that they rubbed off on me positively. You understand? Introversion adds its own strength, but at the end of the day, you find out that you may particularly miss out on a lot of things if you cannot balance it to be an ambivert, to be extroverted when you need to be extroverted, and to be introverted to come into yourself.
Just to know the balance.
Absolutely, the balance. So I feel strongly that those experiences back in primary and secondary school shaped me to strike a balance within my disposition to life.
What you do I mean, I can't see how it comes cheap. It must really dig into your pocket to ensure that this happens. So where do you get funding for this? Are you enjoying the kind of government collaboration that you should to keep you going?
As much as they are not sustainable, I will not put to the side the level of support we've had in past years, but those were not sustainable. So, and owing to the fact that we're driven not by this external support, we had to look inwards and also extend our tentacles to other levels of support, and that's how we've been able to wade through, although we have not particularly waded through, is through goodwill. You know, just like I said, I attended a unity school, so most of
your old students, alumni,
you know, you engage all of those, and also you engage part of your personal funds to be able to make sure, although when we speak about it to people who know the right thing to do, they tell me that that's not wise, you should source for funds.
Exactly.
But those things don't come you know, they don't come easy. Apart from not coming easy, when they come, they don't even come with a timeline. You understand? So you really need to do what you have to do to make sure that the dream doesn't die. And of course,
whatever happens, I mean, when I listen to people like you who are trying to make a difference, and then I hear people who say that we have grants all over, please make it make sense. Like I've been hearing people say, make it make sense.
Yeah.
Are there really grants ready for people in the education sector?
Yeah.
And why are they not being assessed by people like you who really want to make a difference?
Well, there are, and I believe that the grantors have not particularly expanded their scope to accommodate what other people do, apart from what they consider the scope with which they want to put their grants in, or what they don't put their money in. You understand? If I come to you and what your interest in is probably healthcare, even education, and what you mean by education is probably IT, you understand, then you won't give me money for spell and trail. You understand? So it has to do with the fact that we have grantors who have a particular space that they want to fund, owing to reasons best known to them. You understand? And we can't particularly tamper with that. So I just feel that what we need to do, there are grants in the education space. I just feel that what we need to do is to, you know, as much as possible, key into what is available first in a country.
Right.
You know, the ministries of education, the state universal basic education. Well, I know they have funds for this kind of thing, but you know the bureaucratic bottlenecks that usually come in place, especially for things like this. However, I think the long and short of this whole story is that there are grants. However, they may not particularly fit into the objectives of the grantors.
Okay, for people in this same space who are doing their bit, I mean, when you hear these statistics, I don't know, I think it's from the Bureau of Public Enterprise or UNESCO. I mean, I saw a report from UNESCO, I think a 2022 report, stating that over 20 million Nigerian children. So when you hear such statistics, do you question it? A lot of people are very skeptical about these statistics that are reeled out all the time. Do you question it to say that indeed 20 million children in Nigeria may not possibly be out of school? And if you do not, how do you identify a child who is indeed out of school with the data problem we all face?
All right, I think what we should be talking about is not particularly the veracity of the statistics or the data. I think we should first identify the fact that there is a challenge, the out of school children challenge. Whether the numbers match up or not, we know that if there's going to be a difference, I doubt if it's going to be a 20% differential. You understand? Even if we have a 20% differential, it's still worrisome. It's still something that has to be tackled. Now, how do we identify out of school children? We're talking about children who are hawking on the street, children whose parents cannot afford basic education, and that brings us back to the issue of the premium, or the premium being placed on basic education in Nigeria. I believe strongly that basic education should be free up until senior secondary school. And the fact that government is subsidizing tertiary education should be re-examined.
Examined?
Yes, it should be re-examined, because if we do not have a very standard basic and secondary education, then I really do not, by basic and secondary, I'm talking about free basic and secondary education, free as in free. So
when you say then it should be re-examined, is it reviewed downwards, reviewed upwards?
I feel,
or you do not believe that it should be subsidized in the first place?
I feel that the subsidy should be re-examined. You understand? If we have, we are supposed to have secondary school students who are of market value. Do you understand it now? People graduating from high school, people graduating from secondary school who are of market value. So if you're going to the university, if you're going to proceed with your tertiary education, it should be that you want to proceed with your tertiary education and you should be able to pay for it. So having children in KG1, in nursery school, are putting a lot of burden on parents, especially in a country like ours, beats the sense in it. You understand? People should be able to afford, not even afford. Basic education and secondary education should be free.
I agree with you.
Totally free. And tertiary education subsidy re-exam, if that is where the bulk of the money is going
right.
to. If it's for the fact that the government cannot afford that subsidy, then I feel that the whole subsidy for education should be re-examined.
Now, a lot of questions have also followed the president's stand when it comes to, encouraging children to go back to school. We've got the Almajiri initiative that 2 presidents ago introduced, where schools were built, furnished, and in a bid to attract children from the streets, and not to beg, but back into the school classrooms. And then that failed. We've had incentives, cash incentives, where parents can get cash from government and children could get even the school feeding programs. We've had several initiatives that should take children off the streets back into the classrooms. All those have failed. Why?
For the Almajiri schools, I believe strongly that it's not a case of how do I say now, unavailability of schools in the first place. So I believe that there was a mix-up or a missing link in creating specialized Almajiri schools. I believe strongly that there were schools that could accommodate Almajiri, the Almajiri system, right. Even right on board. So I believe strongly that the Almajiri system should be looked into, the socioeconomic aspect of the Almajiri system. So building new Almajiri schools, I doubt strongly if it will handle the system.
Well, I don't think it was supposed to be a case of building Almajiri schools.
Yeah.
It was building the formal schools and pulling in the Almajiri students.
Should have been the focus.
Now, the whole Almajiri system is precipitated by the Islamic teaching. Now, is it possible, cultural and religious wise, is it possible to marry the two, where students can indeed have these religious teachings and double it with the formal teaching? But I don't think government looked at the possibility of harmonizing these two possibilities. Or is the religious setting too strict to accommodate a possibility of formal learning? What is that disconnect there?
I think that disconnect between Western education and Islamic education is what we are supposed to bridge when we talk about the Almajiri system. That's where we're supposed to address the situation from, and not particularly bringing in a new glamour, the glamour of building new schools and the likes. I believe that it is still the socio-economic gap between Western education and Islamic education, and seeing if Islamic education is what they want to stand by, and if Islamic education is what would take them to the next step. If it would take them if it would take the northerners, the Amajiri system, to the next step, why not find a way to look at the curriculum around that? And if there could be a bridge or a gap between the Amajiri system and the Western education, we should be looking strictly at that before talking about building schools. That must be addressed. If not, we would have the repeat of the situation where schools are built and then nobody is
attending those schools,
or attending those schools.
Yes, but okay, this peculiarity from the south where I come from is that when you see a child out of school, I'm from the south, proudly so. Now, when you see a child out of school, it is no longer because of religious reasons. It's not because this child is out of school to in the Amajiri system to learn Islamic. It's because this child needs to economically contribute to the home. So the peculiarities per region as to why children are out of school differ from every region. In my region, I can tell you that the reason, in fact, I read an article that confirmed and validated what I'm saying, that the reason for the out of school children in certain regions, especially my region, is economic contribution to the household. So in that case, what would you suggest that the government would do to ensure this child or this parent understand the need for this child to be harmonized or brought back into the classroom for a better economic contribution in future instead of that gratification that comes from hawking?
It's good that we operate a democratic system. However, I believe strongly that orientation, the National Orientation Agency, the Ministry of Information will have a lot to do. It's easier. The challenge you're posing from the south is very much easier to solve.
It is?
Yes, I believe strongly, because one is the National Orientation Agency, the Ministry of Education, and then there should be consequences. You understand? There should be consequences for having your child on the street if it's about contributing economically to the family. And like I said, taking me back to the issue of free basic education. Free as in totally free. Free and of good quality basic education. If it is free, the Southwesterners, there were incentives, I believe, by Power Bafemi or blessed memory, and that's why you have people from the Southwest who are, very much on the scale now. Very much, if we would scale, we'll have more people who are educated from the Southwest. You understand? There was a system in place to have achieved that. That can be replicated if we are really serious with what we are doing, and if we don't pay lip service to what we are doing. It's not rocket science.
It's not rocket science, and even rocket science has been figured out. I just wondered, as you were talking, the Child Right Act, Section 15, subsection 2, talks about every parent or guardian shall ensure that his child or ward attends and completes his primary education, junior secondary education. We'll go for a short break right now. When we come back, we'll talk about the punitive measures that Ayotunde has just casually mentioned. Is it possible? Other countries have enacted it. Why can't Nigeria do that? This is still Joy Asonye Live. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is still Joy Asonye Live, where we've been talking to Ikulamberu Ayotunde. I don't care if I got it right. I tried. He's the president, Educand Education Initiative, a community development and an advocate group for education. We had been talking about the out-of-school children. He's talking about consequences and punishments for those who do not comply to the Nigerian Child Right Act. Is it possible to be implemented in Nigeria? I think I should just go take that question to you. Can we implement it? But before you answer, bear in mind the social, cultural, and religious reasons that have kept children out of school in the first place.
I believe strongly that it's still a challenge of the Nigerian state. Many of the things that are happening to us right now are still out of a lack of consequences. So it spreads. It's a multiplier effect. But I believe that if we have purposeful leadership and leadership that is ready to do the right thing, it's not a hard thing to do. You understand? It's not a hard thing to do, to make sure that parents get their children to school and ensure that they complete at least basic education. So it's also to talk about government being serious about it, government not paying lip service to it. So I believe with incentives and with consequences, we can get what we need.
So recently, the Nigerian government got secured a $700 million loan from the World Bank to boost adolescent girls' learning and empowerment. And when you go into the justification for this, they tell you that about 5,000 naira will be given to parents who ensure their children come to school, their girl child comes to school, and the children would have incentives, some cash incentives at the end of every term, considering the attendance and all of that. While that is fine, do you agree? A lot of experts have refused that that's not a good incentive to bring children into school. 5,000 for in the first place is very small. It's meager. And secondly, it's not a sustainable initiative. But what do you think?
Okay, let's go back to the fact that it's even for girls.
This is just targeted at girls.
You know, it's a bit uncomfortable to speak at it because okay, I'm of the male gender. However,
I like to think you're a he for she, but go ahead.
However, I understand that when you educate a female, you educate a nation. But we need to really look at what we are doing and to make sure that whatever it is we are doing, we also have counterpart plans for the male child, because we do not have a system that runs only on. I understand that absolutely we have a culture that probably relegates the female gender, relegates the female gender. However, we should be sure that there is a balance. I don't know if you get me. There is a balance between all of these, because you do not want to have educated females and derelict male. It will still all go well.
There would still be that gender inequality.
You want to have a wife to a husband who feels, who feels derelict, and then the wife is way ahead in education. We must strike a balance. The male child, the female child, and make sure.
But I guess that was this was informed by the statistics that because of cultural and religious reasons, the girl child was not encouraged to pursue education. More boys were sent to school. The girl had to be with the mother, learn the ropes of motherhood early, learn the ropes of how to be a wife, and so that hindered a girl child getting to school. And that's a bit to address it. I personally do not support cash palliatives of any sort, but in this case, I don't know. You work in that field. Do you think it's in the long run, government can afford to be borrowing as much as $700 million for such initiatives, however fancy and noble it may be?
I believe that cash palliatives for that purpose is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. However, it will achieve. It will achieve some things.
But would it outrun?
It's just not sustainable.
Right.
You understand? It will achieve the aim. Perhaps the 5,000 would get a number of students to school, and then they're able to complete primary school. But after that tranche, what happens? Because a lot of new babies keep coming up. So are we going to keep incentivizing with cash palliatives for every set of births
that comes in?
I don't think it's sustainable. Except there are other factors, surrounding the cash incentive. Whether it's just cash incentive for a child to go to school, I believe strongly that it's not sustainable.
Do you think 5,000 is enough? Because I mean, call me somebody living in a bubble, but I don't see what 5,000 naira can actually do for anybody in Nigeria right now.
Well,
is it something that can take the students' pupil for a term?
Well, for those, if we're saying that for the educational purpose and making sure that the children are in school, making sure that the children are in school for that cash incentive, I believe that there are some communities that are still really, I wouldn't say poverty riddled. I would say they are more greatly on subsistence living. A 5,000 may do some 30% of work for them, you understand, for the month.
Now let's talk about that punitive measure you mentioned.
Right.
A friend of mine called and said the child slipped and fell, right? In Ireland. My friend is in Ireland. Her daughter slipped and fell. And if that child has to go to school with that injury, questions will be asked. You know, brows will be raised, as it's often said, and she has to quickly take the child to the hospital and ascertain that, so that they ascertain that there's a medical report that also validates that this child slipped and fell. So that kind of strict, this is a child who has to go to school slipping and falling. And I'm just wondering, in Nigeria, a child comes to school, doesn't come a week after, the authorities are not called, and nobody is concerned. The teachers are like, oh, well, he didn't come today, maybe he's dropped out, maybe he's not. Nobody is pursuing to see how that one child. It goes to show where we are. Now you talk about punitive or consequences, like you put it, for parents who do not bring their children. Should the government follow this top trend and enact a policy to say, you know what, if you do not enroll your child in school, you stand a jail term, like in Singapore. You stand to go to jail for 2 years, or having to pay a certain fine or community service and all of that. Look at Nigeria as it is before you respond, though. I'm serious. So look at Nigeria and tell me if this is even possible.
So I believe strongly, right, that we need to merge our socio-economic and cultural systems to have an organized system. You know, if we do not you know, prioritize organization, if we not prioritize organization, we will not achieve a lot. I understand that there are a lot of bets in the informal sector. I think that's also one of the major challenges we face. Parents who give birth to children, especially in the villages, who are not documented. But I feel that many of the things that we face in terms of data can be addressed from there. You understand? Because if we have children being birthed in organized system in the formal healthcare sector, that will help us to plan. I
don't think it's such a hurdle. I mean, if you cannot access certain facilities until you have your birth certificate, I'm sure parents, no matter how illiterate they may be, will make an effort.
That's if there are facilities they want to access. That's if there are facilities they actually want to access. There are some people who live in very remote areas of Nigeria who do not need, or who do not have a need for these facilities you talk about. So we need an organized system where they will need it. There are very many unbanked Nigerians. You know, you are in the city, you feel that, oh, if you don't have your NIN, if you don't have your driver's license, if you don't have a means of identification, you will not be able to do a lot of things. There are a lot of people who are in the remote areas who do not.
I was appalled when I saw the data for how many Nigerians do not have a phone, are not connected, or own a mobile phone in 2023. Not because they would not love to have it, but because they cannot afford it, and they don't even have access. Somebody was telling me in places, in some states in Nigeria where there is no network access, and these are places where terrorism thrives, and you would expect that something should be done. So I can understand what you mean by facilities that are not available to these people in the first place.
Yes.
But it's also a dire situation we find ourselves. So if you have a staircase conversation, like I always say on the show, if you have a staircase conversation with our president or the powers that be or the stakeholders that should ensure this works, what would you say should be done, and done immediately to attract children back to the classrooms?
I will really commend the government, especially in the healthcare sector, in terms of the primary healthcare system. Taking Ondo State as an example, I know that there are primary health centers in the 693 wards that we have in Ondo State.
You sure are rooted.
693 wards, yes, in Ondo State, and those are functioning. They are functioning. There are systems, there are trainings, a lot of trainings
and retrainings for this.
You understand, for the heads of all of these health centers. If that can be replicated in the health sector,
education sector,
into the education sector, where we have a school, standard school in each ward. You know, there are schools even in local governments
that cannot
particularly,
brag to be standard.
Brings me back to the spell and thrill competition. You know, like I said, we've always had contestants from the public and the private schools, you understand, compete on the platform. You will see that we're given enough time to prepare. You know, having the interaction and the involvement of the teachers and the parents, the spell and thrill platform brings, you know, the students from the private and the public, and you will see that they can compete favorably. They compete favorably. And what
can you say there's a disparity in some regions or across board?
The only thing that brings about disparity is, for us now, is a bureaucratic bottleneck that comes from probably getting approval for the competition for this year, probably preparation materials not getting to the schools on time, and then the students not. In fact, that was why we had to stop getting public schools on board at the time, because we didn't want a situation where you're already in a public school and you come on board and then you're still disadvantaged because you could not prepare. And the truth of the matter is that over the years we've seen that there is really no disparity in terms of preparation. Those people put the students from public schools put a lot of effort in it, and they compete favorably. In fact, they win at the end of the day. So if this can be replicated in the health, in the education sector, what we have in the health sector, where we have the national healthcare agency, there's a national healthcare
it seems they are more, the regulatory body is more stringent in trying, in ensuring it works.
For the state universal basic education boards now, if they are empowered to have standard schools and teachers, recruitment and incentivization on teachers is very key. You understand? We have.
Ayotunde, we still see very dire videos of students having to sit on the floor to get.
We are not that populated not to be able to afford basic education. Our population is not a challenge.
So what is the challenge?
Regulations.
Because we are here giving the monies that we should use for infrastructure.
Regulations and seriousness on the part of government. Just like I said, I will still go back to the health sector, because I play in that sector as well.
It's funny you mentioned the health sector, and this is this health sector that is also complaining that they do not have adequate funding to ensure, like the public health centers you just mentioned and applauded. We've also seen people say the public health centers are in deplorable conditions.
Well, from the sample size that I have.
Is it a regional? I like to
the sample size I have is a state one.
Just a state,
and that's Ondo State.
Ondo State, okay.
So that's
I have not done my homework, so I can't give them.
That sample size I have, and I know of Lagos State as well.
Right.
Yeah, Ondo and Lagos States. At least I know of those two states and how effectively they run their primary healthcare system. By primary healthcare now, we expect that normal delivery. By normal delivery now, I mean delivery that does not require cesarean section. Normal delivery.
Of course, they refer when it is above the
primary health center. You know, you have situations that those primary health centers, and they are in each wards. They are in each ward. So by ward now, they are not overwhelmed by the population. For places where you cannot, every ward does not have the same population.
Of course.
So for places where there are more population, you have 2, 3, 4 of them, as against the one that is statutory for each ward. If that can be replicated, and like I said, proper staffing, not just training and retraining of the staff, seriousness. By the time we do this for the next 4 years, we would have achieved a lot, and we would be proud of what would have achieved at the end of those 4 years. And education will not be as it is. And that is where we can address effectively the issue of out-of-school children. It is in those wards. We can get them on board. We can get those students incentivized, the parents and the children. I'm not saying cash incentivizing. There are several ways of incentivizing the parents and the children to bring them to school and to make sure that they stay in school. It's not just bringing them to school, to make sure they stay the course, and there is monitoring and evaluation. So these are things that are doable if we are serious. I understand there are several factors that may militate against this, but it still has to do with leadership. Brings me back to the issue of our Honorable Minister of Interior and the issue of the passports. Leadership. It's leadership.
Exactly. Where passports are all of a sudden available.
Leadership is leadership.
I hear over 2,000.
Not 2,000, please. 204,000 plus backlog. And then we had our minister talk about
about a
month ago. And in less than 2 weeks, we have all of those things cleared. So, like I would always tell everybody,
purposeful leadership.
Everything in this country, around the world, rise and fall on leadership. So it is making those declarations and letting whoever it sees that is in that value chain know that there are consequences.
Exactly.
If there are consequences, people will line up.
Exactly.
They will stay in line. I promise you.
Okay, now before I let you go, a lot of time, when we talk about education, we still talk about the classrooms. What happened to the technical education that we used to be proud of in this country, where it didn't have to be the 4 walls of the university or the 4 walls of a school per se, but you could be learning a skill, and that skill would economically empower you and your generations, really. What's going on there? I can't believe I got you speechless.
I'm not speechless. I just see how for the want of a better word now, how we are not just we can't just stay true with our plans. Now you have polytechnics offering courses like mass communication. Makes no sense. That's not what they were established for in the first place. There are colleges of education, universities. In the first place, I really don't understand what even brought about the dichotomy between a person who has finished from Polytechnic and a person who has finished from those graduates from those institutions have just peculiar
rules. Exactly.
But a lot of things have just been muddled up, and I believe strongly that it's still the place of putting incompetent hands at the helm of affairs of education. You can play politics with
every other thing, but education is the basic.
Those are places where you need to put in people who really understand what it is for a child to be educated, and apart from being educated, to be able to be useful to himself and the society after being educated.
Exactly.
And stay the course. So you don't have a situation where a polytechnic graduate is feeling less of a university graduate. They have their roles to play.
They have their competencies.
They have their roles to play. So when you talk about technical schools, all of those things moribund now, they had their roles to play at the time. And we are suffering for it. Seriously suffering for it. So what that means is that we need to import expatriates for things that we could have gotten people from the polytechnic to do, or we would have gotten people from the technical schools to do. you know, people would have gotten people from universities to do. So,
and what is even happening with the research and development in our universities?
Policies. But
what happens when advocates like you, people like you who are obviously very passionate about the education system, what happens when you engage government with some of the solutions you have? Do you see reception? How is the reception basically? Are you seeing people who indeed want it to work, or we still go through this bureaucracy, we go under the umbrella to say we are stuck there again?
It's still a lot of bureaucratic bottlenecks that we still need to keep making sure that we pierce through. We still need to pierce through a lot. You know, we have people who, we still have we have a country that lacks that level of organization needed to get us to where we want to go to, where we intend, or the envisioned height. We still have a lot to do, and it is not going to be a lot. It is not going to be a lot if we are able to define our path and to stay true to the course. You know, define the path and stay through. If we're able to define the path and stay through, I believe strongly that we'll be fine. Especially when people, Habakkuk chapter 2 was talking about put the vision, you know, in writing, so that whoever comes can run by that vision. So it's not a situation where we have a minister today, there's a template. So if that comes in, it's not coming into
yes.
You don't come in with your new idea.
Yes.
Work
within what the institution
if that is what is going to take us to our envisioned height, let's make sure that we follow through with what's taking us to our envisioned height. You understand? So I believe strongly that if we have purposeful leadership and we're able to define our path, definition, we need to define our path and to know the course that we want to take through to be able to get to our envisioned height.
Well, Ikulamberu Ayotunde, President, Educand Education Initiative, I must thank you again for being part of the program.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great time of
it has, and watching you passionate about what you do is exhilarating rather, but this is where we draw the curtain on the program.
Thank you.
Okay, this has been Joy Asonye Live, but this is sadly we've come to the end of the program. We'll be back tomorrow to discuss many more important national issues, so keep a date with us as we come back tomorrow. But for now, have a wonderful night rest.